going to talk to you about the brain, different lobes in the brain, as well as structures inside those lobes, and the cranial nerves. An easy way to learn each lobe is to remember that each lobe is named after the skull bone that they underlie. There's the frontal lobe, the parietal lobe, the temporal lobe, and the occipital lobe. The frontal lobe is located at the front of the brain. Functions of the frontal lobe include personality, complex problem solving, planning, and judgment. Motor areas of the frontal lobe control movements of the voluntary skeletal muscles. The frontal lobe is also known as the control panel of our personality and our ability to communicate. Damages to the frontal lobe include changes in personality, limited face expressions, and difficulty interpreting one's environments. For example, not being able to adequately assess risk and danger. The parietal lobe sits posterior to the frontal lobe. Functions in the parietal lobe include spatial orientation. This is also where sensory information is processed. Other info such as touch, taste, and temperature is also processed in the parietal lobe. You can find the thalamus also located inside the parietal lobe. Damages here can result in difficulties in regards to language, inability to write and speak, impaired reading, and inability to position lips and tongue in a position to speak. Other difficulties include the inability to distinguish objects by touch. The temporal lobe is located inferior to the frontal and the parietal lobe. Functions include auditory perception, memory, speech, language comprehension, emotional response, visual perception, and facial recognition. Structures inside the temporal lobe include the olfactory cortex, the amygdala, and the hippocampus. Damage to the temporal lobe include memory, difficulties understanding language, and problems maintaining emotional control. Strokes and seizures have a huge impact on the temporal lobe, causing inability to understand language or to speak properly, as well as difficulty hearing and perceiving sound. The occipital lobe is located at the rear side of the skull. Major functions of the occipital lobe is visual perception, color recognition, reading and reading comprehension, depth perception, and recognition of object movement. It receives visual information. Vision is the ability to detect images of visual light. The eye transmits this information via nerve to the visual cortex. The visual cortex takes this information and processes it so that we are able to determine colors, identify objects, shapes, and other visual aspects. After being processed, this information is later sent to the temporal and the parietal lobes for further processing. Damage to the occipital lobe can result in multiple vision-related problems. This includes the inability to discern colors, vision loss, visual hallucinations, the inability to identify words, and distort visual perception.
The nervous tissue that makes up the brain is divided into two classes, gray matter and white matter. Gray matter consists of empty neurons that are unmyelinated. The gray matter is the tissue where the actual process of signal happens. The white matter, which consists of myelinated neurons found in the deeper tissue of the brain. The brain can be divided into three parts: the forebrain, the midbrain, and the hindbrain. One thing we should remember: the closer we are to the spinal cord, the more basic the functions are. In hindbrain, it's going to be basic stuff like keep the heart beating, keep the circulation going, and digestion. Functions like thinking, memories, and emotions are going to be in the forebrain. The forebrain is broken down into two more regions, the cerebellum and the diencephalon. The cerebellum is the largest part of the brain. It's divided through the middle by the longitudinal fissure into the left and right hemisphere, each of which is further divided into 4 lobes: frontal, parietal, temporal, and occipital. Surface of the cerebrum called the cerebral cortex, which is made out of gray matter with characteristic sarci and gyri. The cerebral cortex is responsible for the higher brain functions like thinking and using language. Below the cerebral cortex is the basal ganglia that are associated with variety of functions including motor movements, learning, eye movements, and cognition. Damage to basal ganglia, which is Parkinson's disease, may cause problems controlling speech, movement, and posture. Cerebellum is a structure formed by thalamus, hypothalamus, and the pineal gland. The thalamus can be compared with a router. It's basically sorting data and sending where it needs to go. If we look below that, it's a little structure called hypothalamus. It's the homeostasis and the maintaining of the body temperature. Right below, we have a little gland hanging out, master gland, the size of the pear. It's the pituitary gland, which is important in sending out hormones like oxytocin, cortisol, growth hormone, and diabetes insipidus. At the bottom of the brain, we have brainstem and cerebellum. The brainstem is broken down into the medulla oblongata, pons, and midbrain. The midbrain has functions like level of oxygen in the blood and reflexes like sneezing. The pons helps to regulate the rhythm of breathing, and the midbrain is involved in reflex reaction, reward seeking, and learning. The cerebellum looks like a smaller version of the cerebrum. It has two spheres and it's wrinkled. The main function of it is motor control. If you are involved in sport, that's the cerebellum that is giving you the coordination. Also, it's giving you the motion memory. If you learn how to ride the bike and you remember how to do it, then thanks to your cerebellum.
And the next part of this video will be about the 12 cranial nerves. But now we're going to get into the first 6. So first we have the olfactory nerve. The olfactory nerve transmits sensory information to the brain about the smells that we smell. Next we have the optic nerve. The optic nerve is a sensory nerve that involves the body transmitting to the brain what is being seen. Next we have the oculomotor nerve. The oculomotor nerve has a muscle response and a pupil response. The oculomotor nerve gives motor function to 4 of the 6 muscles around your eyes. The oculomotor nerve also controls the size of the pupil as a response to light. Next, we have the trochlear nerve. The trochlear nerve controls your superior oblique muscle. This is a muscle that allows the downward, outward, and inward movements of the eye. Next, we have the trigeminal nerve. The trigeminal nerve has 3 divisions: occiput, maxillary, mandibular. The occiput division transmits sensory information from the upper part of your face, including your cheek, upper lip, and nasal cavity. The maxillary division transmits sensory information from the middle part of your face, including your cheeks, upper lip, nasal cavity. The mandibular division has both a sensory and a motor function. It transmits information from your ears, lower lip, and chin. It also controls the movement of muscles in the jaw and ear. Next, we have the abducens nerve. The abducens nerve controls the lateral rectus muscle. This muscle is also responsible for the outward movement of the eye. Okay, so now we're going to get into the next 6 cranial nerves. Number 7, we have the facial nerve. The facial nerve allows movement of muscles used for facial expressions and some of your muscles in your jaw, providing your sense of taste for most of your tongue and supplying glands in your head or neck area, communicating sensations from other parts of your ear. Next, we have the vagus nerve. The vagus nerve is a different one because it has both sensory and motor functions, along with having the longest pathway. It communicates sensations from your ear canal to certain parts of your throat and also sends information from organs such as your heart and intestines. The vagus nerve is also responsible for controlling muscles in your throat. Another function is providing a sense of taste near the root of your tongue. Then we have the accessory nerve. This is considered the motor nerve, which controls the muscles in your neck. These are the muscles that allow you to rotate, flex, and extend your neck muscles and shoulders. Last but not least, we have the hypoglossal nerve. This is the 12th cranial nerve and is responsible for the movement of most of the muscles in your tongue. It originates in the medulla oblongata and moves down into the jaw. Next, we have the vestibulocollicular nerve. The vestibulocollicular nerve is the nerve that is broken into two parts, the cochlear portion and the vestibular portion. The cochlear portion has specialized cells within the ear that detect sound vibrations based off the sound loudness and pitch. The vestibular portion also has specialized cells that track both linear and rotational movements of your head and is used to adjust the balance of the equilibrium. Next, we have the glossopharyngeal nerve. The glossopharyngeal nerve sends sensory information from your sinuses, the back of your throat, parts of your inner ear, and the back part of your tongue. It also provides a sense of taste for the back part of your tongue. It also stimulates voluntary movement of a muscle, and the back of your throat is called just stylopharyngeal.